Welcome to the Filmlings podcast,
a mixed rendered podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 132, Lord and Miller's Laughs and Mischiefs.
That's right. Today, Jonathan, we're going to be talking about a pair of directors, producers, writers, all around collaborators. It almost doesn't feel right to call them just directors, although they do that. They also are primarily animators. They have a dip into the live action world, but animators might be the most accurate title. But regardless, we are speaking of one Phil Lord and one Christopher Miller, both born in 1975. Lord is from Miami, Florida. Miller is from Seattle, Washington. Literally like two of the farthest points on the in the continental U.S. And they met in college at Dartmouth College, where they went, where both made short films and ran columns in the student newspaper. And eventually a paper, that same paper that they worked at actually, ran a column on Miller, which was so like congratulatory and celebratory and promising that it caught the attention.
Miller. Just kidding.
I mean, I don't know who the article was written by. I didn't look that up, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it wasn't Miller. But this did catch the attention of one Bill Eisner, who at the time was the head of Disney. You've almost certainly heard his name before if you move in film circles. Anyway, he really, really liked the article and thought Miller was super promising and wanted to see if they could set up an interview with him, probably hire him, snipe some fresh animation talent coming out of college. And Miller said he would only do it if he could bring Lord, and it was a done deal. The two moved to L.A., where their show Clone High...
Are you saying that Lord is the Owen Wilson to Wes Anderson?
Kind of, in a way, yeah. Except those
school friendships are always fun to see how they evolve.
Yeah. And the two moved to L.A., where their show Clone High was produced by Fox. And then dropped by Fox, which is a very Fox thing to do, by the way, to constantly cancel stuff that no one wants canceled. Then produced for a full season by MTV, where it met with acclaim. They continued to work on a series of other sitcoms and shows, and eventually they were tapped to write Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And then they were fired, and then their replacements were fired, and then they were hired again. And this is just kind of how Hollywood is. It's always been a little bit that way, but it's been especially that way for the past few decades.
Also, not really the only time that's happened to them, and we'll get into all that later on in the show.
This is incredibly common, especially it's kind of been. It's not that it didn't happen in the studio system, or that I'm going to go into a tirade singing the praises of the studio system, as the studio system had a lot of problems of its own, but the lack of centralized production and direction at the studio level after the fall of the studio system definitely shows, especially when you get into development hell stories like this, where people are hired and then fired and then fired and then hired, and how development hell has just become, or feels like it has become, much more common in the past few decades. And they're definitely susceptible to that. I believe it happened to them on Star Wars as well.
Solo.
The Han Solo thing. But regardless, we will be talking about a few of their movies today. The first of which, actually, I think we're talking about four. They're four features. I don't think they've done any other features yet. But they do have some in the works.
Except for sequels. We're not covering sequels, but we're just going to roll them into the discussion.
I don't think we're talking about Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2 or 22 Jump Street.
Or the Lego Movie 2.
There is a Lego Movie 2, isn't it? Yeah, and I don't know how, off the cuff, I don't know how involved with it they are. I'm sure they have producer credits. I don't know if they directed any of it. Or
they
wrote
directed,
any of it.
I actually have this pulled up right here. They directed 22 Jump Street, and wrote the Lego Movie 2 and kind of have a story credit for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2. So varying levels of involvement.
Gotcha.
And we'll see that with Spider-Man 2, because Phil Lord co-wrote Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and they're both writing the sequel. So it's like they're so all over the place with their films, and if they're directing or writing or producing and just kind of like jumping in and out. But needless to say, they are having a big impact on the way that animation is happening right now. So that's really what we're getting into.
Yeah, and the films we're talking about today are Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs from 2009, which is directed and written by both Lord and Miller, and it was their first feature project. 21 Jump Street from 2012, which is directed by both as well. Not written by them, though. And then this was their first foray into live action. Then the Lego Movie from 2014, which was, again, directed and written by the both of them. And finally, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse from 2018, which is the epitome of a collaboration project, which is something that both Lord and Miller are self-professed very into. They really like high collaborative projects where there isn't like a super clear head person, director, super in charge of everything. I mean, they are a collaborative team themselves, right? But Spider-Man was directed by 3 people. Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman. And it was written in part by Phil Lord. He has a story credit on it. And then Lord and Miller were both part of the horde of producers, along with Avi Arad, Amy Pascal, and Christina Steinberg. So that movie had a lot of creative talent at the top, who were very much in a collaborative kind of work structure, and that seemed to work very well for that movie. But without further ado, let's hop into the individual breakdowns, starting with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs from 2009. Jason, take it away.
Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs from 2009. Flint Lockwood is a failed inventor. It's not that he hasn't invented anything, just that his experiments never go quite right. His pet monkey, Steve, and emotionally uncommunicative father don't really provide the support he needs either. But everything changes when he invents a machine that can turn water into food, and then promptly causes an accident that launches the machine into the sky. At first, everything is great. Flint is a star overnight, and meteorologist Sam Sparks finds her career rising as ever-increasingly strange food-based weather patterns form over Flint's hometown. But the food that falls from the sky becomes increasingly larger in a state that no one could rightfully call under control. Now it's up to Flint to own up to his shortcomings and stop his machine before it crushes his own town into dust.
All right, Jonathan, have you ever read the original Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs?
I have not, but I'm very curious to know how any book could have inspired the ridiculousness that is this movie.
It's very loosely inspired. I don't think I've
It feels like that.
Yeah, I've read Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I have absolutely no memory of it other than the cover because I read it when I was a very small child. But it is definitely loosely inspired by that. But it is very much a big movie, a fun movie, a colorful movie.
Oh yeah,
and it feels, especially when we look at some of their other work, it very much feels like this is, especially in retrospect, it feels like a training ground for both Lord and Miller. Like you see the parts of their style that will become bigger in their later 3 films, and that I can almost guarantee, I'm willing to bet you'll see in Spider-Man 2 and their other upcoming works. Bright colors and characters, zany situations, rapid-firing visuals, also rapid-firing story beats and character development and jokes, and then concepts that where the comedy derives from them being blown up to just huge proportions. So something that could be kind of funny on paper, and then what if you took it to the nth degree, and that's what makes it funny? And in this one, it literally becomes that through just food becoming ginormous. But there's always a parallel in that concept becoming big and becoming funny by being big, but also that concept becoming dangerous in a way that ratchets up the drama and the character development as well.
Yeah. And honestly, that kind of speed of the comedy that you were talking about almost makes me think of which I hadn't really thought about it in these terms, but it's basically Screwball. Like the speed of those old school type of comedies really transfers well into all the work of Phil Lord and Chris Miller, where it's just kind of joke after joke that makes it rewatchable, which is great, especially for a children's film. But also there's so much like nuance to some of the stuff that's just happening so quickly that you almost have to watch it multiple times, and you get the smaller layers, like the one child who just yells, "I love strawberry," and is the only one on the strawberry side of the Neapolitan ice cream. But there's also like a range of stuff. So there's, oh my gosh, rewatching this movie, which I've seen several times, but there are some things that I was just like,
one of your favorites.
Oh, it's almost like an instant classic. Like, it's so quotable and just ridiculous, but just like wholesomely fun at the same time. And yet, rewatching it, I was thinking there are so many things in here that I'm kind of shocked that they got away with. Like in the ice cream scene, when he goes on like literally like a neighborhood shooting rampage, but with ice cream snowballs. So it's fun, but it's literally like a shooter in the way that it's framed and stuff like that. You're like, did they really pull that off? But another thing that this movie, I think, shows off that's going to come up in all of their films, and kind of the running theme that I was sort of noticing throughout their career, is that they have such a good grasp on story structure and also tropes. And they use them in both a very self-aware way and also in a very kind of manipulative way, in kind of like a Hitchcockian manipulative way, where if they can lead you down a path that feels very familiar, so we kind of know where we're going, then they have all the reins to just turn it in a different direction and kind of subvert your expectations. So they do that a lot by using references to film genre, references to specific films. There's a lot of specific film references towards the end of the film, and character tropes and stuff like that. And this shows up in all four of these movies that we're going to be talking about today. The Lego movie is probably the most obvious, but it's kind of like woven into the fabric of everything that they do. You can tell that they love film and they really understand how it works and why other people like different types of movies.
Yes, they're definitely very well experienced, both in like they've done their homework. You know, they've seen a lot of the classics and absorb it and incorporate into that into their work, and their working structure as well is really, really, really good. And this is common in all forms of movie making, but it's very common in animation to have a very heavily iterated style, and especially in animation, where basically you make an animatic of the whole movie. Which, if you're unfamiliar with that term, an animatic is almost like a pumped up storyboard of a sort that's put in order to kind of like move as if it was a shot by shot make of the movie.
It's like turning a storyboard into a PowerPoint almost.
Yeah. And you make a full one of those before you make the movie, before you spend the money on animating it, right? So I think they said that they made this movie like 4 or 5 times. In the animatic stage, and there were a lot of changes in that process, and that iteration kind of helps develop the story to be better and more, especially when you're working with such a loose concept. It can be hard to find a root in something to ground the characters, something to make it feel real. I think the story that sticks out most from the iteration process for me is Flint's father was originally just like he just worked at the tackle store and was Flint's like boss, basically, who worked there along with him. And he wasn't supposed to have any kind of deep thing. But, you know, the fact that that's his father and that he can't, he's not good at communicating emotionally, kind of becomes like a big part as to why we care about Steve not Steve, Steve's the monkey. Why we care about Flint.
We do care about Steve.
We do care about Steve. His translator plays a big part in it, as to why we care so much about Flint as a character because of his family connections. Or, I mean, honestly, let's talk about Steve, because that's a good point that comes into iteration. And I've heard it said before that I think from Neil Gaiman, that the process of making a second draft is the process of making it look like you knew what you were doing the entire time. And something like the fact that Flint's father is finally able to express his feelings through Steve's monkey translator is exactly the kind of thing that you would have come up through iterations and second drafts.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea, but it's not the kind of good idea that just pops up on its own. So, I mean, these are guys who definitely know their film history and have watched all of the best stuff out there and have absorbed what's good about it and know the process really well and work through that process to make their thing over and over until it's good and worth making.
Yeah. And I think it's important to talk through like the variety of characters and also the level of depth that is put into all the characters. Like you're saying, like the father was really developed into a character, but that kind of bleeds into a lot of the other characterization throughout the film. So you have Mr. T's character, who is the relief for Flint and his father, who are estranged, and then Mr. T is almost like too affectionate towards his son to the point where he makes it, snow ice cream, and then everyone gets
foil.
sick, but he has like this guilt trip angle and all this stuff because he's showing like how father and son should be interacting and that kind of thing. But even, there's so many characters that just have like so many levels to them. Like even baby Brent, who becomes like this ridiculous sort of like superhero towards the end, after being the most annoying character in the world. Yeah. And the mayor, who is not really redeemed, but he seems like, he's just going to, well, no pun intended for his whole character arc, but he seems like he's going to be a small part at the beginning and then just like grows until he overtakes the whole film towards the end, and stuff like that. And then even Manny, who just like shows up at the end and can do everything, which is
Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's like just a lot of detail put into a lot of these into these characters and the way that they interact and stuff like that. Which it's so easy for children's films to not do that I think even when it's kind of done at a very basic level, it's easy to take for granted because like the sidekicks in children's films are often just like dumb and that's their entire like point. And Steve is kind of that, but like you're saying, even just the element of having his thought translator, which becomes part of the way that Flint connects with his dad, like elevates it out of that level to some extent. Disney is really bad about making just dumb side characters.
So one of the things I've noticed, and I'm going to try to avoid going on a tirade here, as I've done more work on TV shows, is that the thing that often makes a TV show good or bad isn't necessarily just the people working on it. And part of that's just because there's so many talented people out there trying to make the best stuff they can. The thing that can make it really good is time and being able to go through that process, like Lord and Miller are just hardcore advocates of doing. And
even how Pixar has their brain trust that we talked about way back in the Toy Story episode.
Pixar works on movies for years before they start making them. Years. Just longer than any other studio would kind of even half think about giving a production cycle for. So oftentimes when you see a crappy kids animated movie that's kind of been pooped out by a studio, it's not because the people working on it are incompetent. In fact, I'm willing to bet a lot of the people working on it are incredibly talented. It's normally because they have X number of people and X amount of time to make it. And it's a miracle that the thing got made and rendered properly in the first place. So it's kind of nice to come back and watch this movie because it's so clear that the people who made it put the time into it. And I do feel like when this movie got released, it almost immediately got written off as just another one of those kids' movies. but it's way smarter than a lot of the other kids movies that came out that year.
Yeah.
Of course, we're also still in the peak era of Pixar dominance. So you either have to be a Pixar lookalike or in that same kind of round 3D animation, which while this doesn't look exactly like a Pixar movie, I would put it in that category just for terms of style and how it would appeal to the general populace of movie consumers. Or you're an indie, you're counter Pixar. You're like a Studio Canal type setup where you're totally different and totally your own. But then you come across to the general audience as indie and artsy and too inaccessible almost immediately. Not to everyone, obviously, and not to a lot of the people who watch this podcast, but from a marketing standpoint, which almost always determines what gets made, it's kind of hard to make good movies like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And the fact that Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is good is kind of a miracle and a real testament to the people who made it and put the time and effort into making it.
Yeah. So I do kind of want to touch on the sequel a little bit. Did you ever watch the sequel?
No, I don't think I've ever watched the sequel.
I watched it one time, so I'm not going to be able to speak to it too specifically. But my main takeaway from the sequel was that they kind of replaced all. So I think the premise of it was they like left something on the island and now it's been taken over by the food and it's like its own little Jurassic Park. And so they have to go back there and fight all the like grown up like food ecosystem or whatever. But my main takeaway was that the whole second movie was written to be an extended like hour and a half long pun, because it was all just food puns one after the other, which Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs has, but I feel like it's not driven by let's make a bunch of silly food puns. It's very character driven.
The humor is almost all character driven.
Mm-hmm. And
which
even
normally
stuff that's
is the kind of humor that sticks with you from a comedy film.
Yeah. And even stuff that's just kind of goofy, like one of the most, still every time I watch it, the most like unexpected parts is at the beginning when he's under the pier moping, and then Sam comes and she's moping too, and she sits down on the pier and her heels go straight into his eyeballs, which is like the most ridiculous meet cute in the world, but it works because they're both brought together by them being very sad, and all this kind of stuff, and it's not just
eyeball kicking.
And eyeball kicking is just the icing on the cake of that one.
Always very important.
Also, I was thinking about it, and I'm trying to think of another film where the MacGuffin turns into the villain. Because that's totally what happens here with the Flimstiffer.
Oh, the Flimstiffer?
Yeah, it starts out as the MacGuffin at the beginning. That is why he's doing everything and why everyone is chasing him and why all the food is coming down. And then it turns into a sentient Hal-like being that is trying to stop them from preventing it making any more food.
I mean, I guess it's the villain. It doesn't really have a lot of sentience or agency, though. It feels like a natural disaster, even though it's man-made. If you know if you're picking up what I'm putting down, right? Like it's the danger, it's the doomsday. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Would you call the Sharknado in Sharknado the antagonist?
Well, I guess in that sense, if we're going back to basics, that would be, I guess in Sharknado, it would be man versus nature. But here, it's more like man versus technology. Is that a thing? Was that one of the categories?
I would call this one man versus self.
Because it's his own invention got out of hand?
Yeah, it's himself. Flimstiffer is Flint.
Okay. So what are the rat birds?
Those are his imaginary children that gave him anxiety, or his imaginary friends from his childhood that gave him anxiety.
Yeah, because he didn't have enough friends giving him anxiety as a child.
No, the point is that he didn't have any friends.
Yeah, that's true. Oh gosh, yeah, I guess
the I think the idea, and the character arc is a little difficult to unpack in this one. It hits, but it's not as easily digestible, I think, as like a Pixar one, because it kind of boils down to something along the lines of you can't rely on external accomplishments to get people to like you.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what he's trying to compensate for. He's like, oh, everyone will like me finally if I do this. But that doesn't entirely hit.
If you put it that way, it does make sense with Sam's arc, which is kind of similar, except she had tried to do the same thing of getting everyone to like her by suppressing everything that she
change myself to be someone else, everyone will like me and I'll get what I want, except that's not how that works.
Whereas Flynn was, if I can make everyone like the stuff that I like, then everyone will like me. And Baby Brent was just like, well, everyone liked me at some point, so they must still like me, right?
Baby Brent was dough in the oven. That man is not fully cooked. And that's just like, is his character. Like, do you know, I mean, have you ever met someone like that where you're like, you need to go back in childhood and spend a few more years there before you come back out and be an adult for a bit?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my one nitpick with Flint's arc would be exactly what we were talking about just now, where it feels like at the beginning, it feels like he just wants to make, he has a very strong want, and that is to make a successful invention. But it is not super duper clear why he wants to do that. Does that make sense?
I think it's
like
more that he is an inventor. He has ideas, and he wants to be a famous inventor or make something that will actually help people. But there's always like one kink in whatever it is that he's invented that makes it not totally useful.
Yeah, I think my thing is we never see him really want to be a famous inventor. Like, he does become one, right? But he doesn't, and he embraces it and he takes requests and stuff, right? But he doesn't like even try to enjoy that fame and find out that it's not what he wants, or like seem to, like, he doesn't change when he becomes super famous, if that makes sense. Like, he's still like a bumbling dude. He was a bumbling dude, and now he's a bumbling dude with a big button.
It's actually very brief, but I think it's in there in the moment when the mayor convinces him to do the huge order right before the ribbon cutting. And then at the ribbon cutting, he says something to Sam when she comes up to him and is like, hey, we've got a big like food storm coming. And he's like, get out of my way. Like, this is my moment to shine. And then like,
I think, that's it.
But it's like 2 seconds.
I think what hurts it actually is when like other people come along and convince him. Like, if it had started off that way, but like the final thing of him doing it shouldn't have been like him needing to be convinced. It should have been like, he's going to do it because it's going to make him the biggest name in the world or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it would have made I think it would have made it a little bit stronger and hit a little better, but I don't think it takes away from anything else we've talked about with the movie.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. And speaking of worldwide, can we just point out that when they're showing the natural disasters on the TV across the world, and all of her reports are being translated into other languages, and then they literally translate it into English again for Britain, just with an accent and with...
Oh yeah, that's a really good joke.
Because the way she says it is like, this is a town that's a la mode. And then when it goes to Britain, it's like, a town that is truly topped with ice cream. Like, totally unnecessary translation, but hilarious.
It's a good joke. It's clever humor. All right, we've been on Cloudy for a while. Do we want to move to 21 Jump Street?
Yeah, let's move off of clever humor for a few minutes. Oh, sorry. Was that a little bit ahead of time?
Nah, 21 Jump Street is a brand, and it's not quite Lord and Miller's brand. But that's okay. We'll talk about that in a sec. Jason, take it away.
21 Jump Street from 2012. Morton is a nerd and Jenko is a jock. And high school is high school. The two aren't exactly what you'd call friends, but years after graduation, the pair meet at the police training academy and find that what one lacks, the other has, and become best friends and bicycle cop partners. After screwing up a big arrest, they find themselves assigned to a promotion/punishment job in the 21 Jump Street division, an undercover unit of cops that pose as high school students to root out high school crimes. Suddenly, Morton and Junko are back in high school, but the roles are reversed after a switch-up, and their friendship and skills as policemen are put to the test.
How familiar are you with the original 21 Jump Street, Alex? Because I am not at all.
Oh, I haven't seen any of it.
I actually watched the title sequence after watching the film, and it's got to be the most 80s police-like titles I've ever seen. Or early 90s, I'm not exactly sure.
And I'm 100% sure that this movie got made because Jonah Hill grew up like watching this and reruns of this.
That would make sense.
Because really, I mean, Lord and Miller directed it, right? But really, this is a Jonah Hill movie. And this is coming off of the, I'm sure he did other stuff in between because late 2010, I mean, he still is, but late 2010s or late 2000s, early 2010s, he was very, very busy making a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. But this is very much like Superbad all over again in a lot of ways. I don't know if you've ever seen Superbad. I thought it was really... It's definitely not your humor. Like I could tell you, if anyone walked into a room and was like, life on the line, make a bet, will Jonathan like Superbad? I'd be like, no. Not a chance. Not a chance.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the things that I have to put out there at the beginning of 21 Jump Street is that this type of movie, like Superbad, I'm gonna say that like Step Brothers falls in this category, like all that kind of stuff are movies that I actively try to avoid, and 21 Jump Street kind of confirmed that for me. So that's what I'm gonna put out at the beginning. I know a lot of people like really love that style of humor. Not for me. So it's kind of just it's literally the veneer that I'm watching it through.
It's a brand. It's very much this. I mean, I can't think of it. It's just teenager humor, right? Like it's kind of got like this immature angle to it. It's a lot of like toilet humor mixed with like kind of like this faux aggressiveness.
That's
and,
actually
like,
oh gosh, I want
like
to get really
kind
technical.
Of being mean for humor, humor's sake. And I'm not saying it can't be funny. But I am saying that it is definitely like a style, right? And some people are going to be into it and some people won't be into it.
Yeah. And I want to get really technical on like why it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't matter. Like if you like that type of humor, it doesn't matter.
Hits, you know? Like
but I will say like the thing that is difficult to like just on a logical level when you're watching it is that they are not very good at being cops and they're not very good at being high schoolers. So it doesn't make any sense why they're in any of these situations. Like either because they act like high schoolers when they should be cops, but they have like no professionalism.
I think that's supposed to be part of the humor. Yeah, it's not really like like if you're coming to 21 Jump Street or Superbad for like logic, like it's not going to hit. We'll get
into that with the relationships too.
So for the really like good parts of it, or Superbad and this. I don't know how this became a Superbad episode, but it did, and that's because 21 Jump Street was written by Jonah Hill and like Jonah Hill's friend. So this movie is very much a Jonah Hill joint. I think there's like this deep emotional level to it that makes sense in that way that like teenage emotions don't make any sense. And in the way that Superbad was about that confusion of growing up and starting to leave high school, I think this movie is more about like what it's like to be just out of high school in some ways. And it doesn't spend a lot of time on that. I'm just saying that those notes are there, and that's kind of what it is. And that is the style of humor on here. Like there's a lot of very inappropriate things that happen, and some of them are hit and were very funny the second time around because I've seen this movie before, like years ago when it came out, and I watched it again recently for this episode. And when I watched it again recently, I did not like it. And there are a lot of parts of it that just did not age well either. Like there are some like not okay parts of this movie anymore, like how Jonah Hill's character is an adult in his mid-20s, and now he's like falling in love with and hitting on a high schooler. Like, that's a no-no. Or like the humor where Channing Tatum's teacher, who I didn't realize at the first time I watched it because the show wasn't out yet, but is the same actress who does Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Oh yeah, she's in The Office too.
Yeah, she's also in The Office. Is a teacher who hits on Channing Tatum, which is actually okay because they're both in their 20s, but like she doesn't know it at the time, so it makes it also weird on screen. And there's a lot of other weird humor like that where you're like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That's weird. But that was also, I guess, just part of the humor of that time period. Or people were still trying to wake up to that. I don't know. But yeah, it doesn't age super well. Also, if you're old now like me, you're probably not going to find it as funny as when you were 16, 17, 18.
Yeah, it's for a certain age group as well. Ideally.
Now, there definitely are a lot of notes of Lord and Miller in here in terms of stuff like the pacing, in terms
picking
of stuff
up on tropes and character and that kind of thing.
Yeah, repetition, iteration of jokes, callbacks, the visual style. And in this one, they start playing with something that they play with a lot in Lego Movie, and you see the whole team work on in Spider-Man with the intermittent slow-mo. In here, it's played up a lot for kind of like over-the-top laughs, where the slow-mo lasts for like a weirdly long time. But it definitely becomes like a part of their action style that you see in Lego Movie.
Yeah.
And some other work from them that's really cool. The bright colors, the zany over-the-top characters that all feel almost like cartoons at times more than 3D animated people.
Well, yeah, and it's also that there's actually a huge portion of the story is built around this idea of when like going back to high school at a different time, and now all the stereotypes of high school are different, and they tried to do like the self-aware woke thing, but I feel like the self-aware woke thing never really comes off right. It never comes off as either woke enough or like critical enough, and it just doesn't make any sense. It just kind of like, you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to think about what you think about anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's I mean, like, it's a teen comedy movie, right? Like, and it definitely feels like that, and it is that. So if that's what you're coming to the movie for, that's what you're going to get. But I don't know if there's a lot of notes in this movie that really.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of the self-aware comedy, though, like, Lord and Miller is always very self-aware, and they're always playing on tropes and stuff. But this one, out of the ones that we're talking about, is like probably the most blunt about it. Like when Ice-T comes up and says, oh, I get it. I'm the stereotypical angry black sergeant. Well, guess what? I'm a sergeant. I worked really hard to get here, and I'm black, and I get angry. And but sometimes they like spell it out too much, and to where it's like, okay, we get that you know what you're doing, but you're still doing the trope. I think that kind of we're hopefully getting away from the self-aware thing, because I think people realize that acknowledging that you know you're doing a trope doesn't actually get you out of still doing the trope. That shows up in a lot of films.
Yeah, I'm also not actually sure if I've ever seen a angry black sergeant trope.
I think there was an angry black sergeant in the original 21 Jump Street, so that's probably where that came from.
Oh, is that where that's coming from? Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
So here's another, this is a real question, but kind of technical again on a story level. The emotional core of the movie, because as silly as the movie is, it still has to have this core, which is the relationship between Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum. And the point is that Channing Tatum feels betrayed by Jonah Hill because Jonah Hill is now popular, and haha, it's funny because the nerd kids are now the popular kids and vice versa, and Channing Tatum is hanging out with all the geeks. But the element that I felt was completely missing was that Channing Tatum never has a self-realization moment where he's like, oh, I was Jonah Hill. I was Jonah Hill to him when we were in high school. He never has the self-reflective moment of he's just mad at Jonah Hill for being so mean to him and never realizing that, oh, wait, I was like that. I should apologize to him too. Yeah, I feel like that was kind of an easy element that was never brought up.
Does that not happen?
I don't think it did. I was waiting for it.
I sort of felt like that happened. Maybe I just inserted it in my head.
Yeah. And maybe it was kind of in there, but I definitely thought that it would be a stronger portion of Channing Tatum's character, but he was just very sad that Jonah Hill was being so mean to him.
Yeah. So, I'm curious about this, Jonathan. So I have one particular kind of humor that I really can't stand. And it's not the immature humor. I mean, sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's not funny for me. You know, it kind of depends on like how well they do it. Some of it's actually genuinely funny, but if it's just immature to be immature, I don't find that funny. It's not like, oh, he said poop. That's funny. Like, I don't actually think that's funny. Just because you said a naughty word.
They say a lot of bad words just for comedic effect.
So there's one kind of humor where you just have to watch someone be really awkward for like an extended period of time. And that's kind of like what they do in this.
That's kind of like Adam Sandler humor, I feel like.
Yeah, I really hate it. I really hate it. I hate it so much. And the reason I hate it is because I don't it's the kind of humor that makes you want to look away from what's happening when someone fails that bad. You don't want to see that, right?
Mhm.
So why would I watch that scene? Like if that's my reaction in real life, like I don't enjoy watching someone fail. Like I really like that isn't fun.
Unless you can add an element of Schadenfreude to it.
Unless you're enjoying watching someone fail or like someone's really hyper confident. It's supposed to be like
a sympathy cringe.
Yeah,
that's harder
like
to pull off.
Yeah, if you see someone like who's knows that they're about to do bad and gets up there and doesn't want to do bad and you don't want them to do bad. And specifically I'm thinking about this poor Jonah Hill in like the first like theater scene.
Oh,
Oof.
With the freaking Peter Pan thing?
Oh man, the first like theater monologue. Oh boy. That is rough. I don't want to watch that.
I love how the theater monologue is the part of this movie that she couldn't stand.
Oh, that's hilarious. There's lots of parts where I'm like, that's inappropriate. Not just like in like, that's inappropriate humor. I'm like, that person should not be flirting with that person. That is not okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a weird moment. And then the other thing, oh gosh, I can't get logical because he's tripping on the drugs and then he does the monologue because he's got his boosted confidence in phase 3 or whatever the heck. And then he goes all the way through to the end of the show after he's not super confident in himself anymore. I mean, progressively, he kind of gets that way through the film. But like, how did he get through rehearsals? Rehearsals don't exist. Also, oh gosh, this kind of movie just like does not understand how high school actually works. Because people don't have this much time to do crap between classes. Or maybe I wasn't in that crowd. I don't know.
I guess they were skipping class or something. Who knows?
Who knows?
It's definitely made up Hollywood high school, which we know is a thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. Next up is The Lego Movie from 2014. Jason, take it away.
The Lego Movie from 2014. The creative and different sections of the Lego world are threatened by Lord Business, who seeks to make all things conform to his instructions, even if it means freezing the world with the power of the all-powerful Kragle. Master builders across the lands have gone into hiding to continue the fight and find the piece of resistance which can stop the Kragle and save the world. but the one who finds the piece is the most average, most by-the-rule-book brick boy in Legoland, Emmett. And now a piece who's never even tried to be creative in his life must become a master builder and stop the Kragel doomsday.
Legos are great, Alex.
I really like this movie. This movie's great. And it's one of those movies that I went to the theater to see, and I wasn't expecting it to be good, and then it was just amazing. Just blew me away.
Those are the best. I love those movies that I have such low expectations for, and then just totally blow me away.
Yeah, because this is way more than, I mean, it's easy to write this off as a kids movie or even as a like kids movie that's also good for adults, but it's just a good movie. Like calling it any sort of kids movie feels really reductive to me.
Yeah,
it is kid friendly, right? But like it also has this whole arc that's built in that's about like what it's like to play with Legos as a kid and what it's like to play with Legos as an adult and what it's like to want creative freedom and what it's like to want to impose order on a world that feels out of control, which is something that anyone who's an adult can probably sympathize with. And comparing and contrasting those two things, the idea that they had this kind of redemptive arc for the villain that doesn't feel cheesy at all.
Oh, yeah. That's
and
so
obviously
well done.
just the endless amount of creativity that is on display in the movie. Just
and
a
detail.
Gobsmack amount of detail. Just I like the amount of time that was spent making this movie just click on every single brick that's on the screen is incredible. All the little jokes, all the world feels so alive. I mean, it would have been so easy to make a Lego movie that feels kind of bland and boring, but they really had so much fun with it. And that's so evident that the whole team just had a blast making this movie that you just can't help but smile whenever you watch it. I don't know if I've ever really met anyone who just hates the Lego movie. And I can't say that about a lot of movies. I've definitely met people who are like, yeah, it's okay. But I don't think I've ever met anyone who was like, oh, I freaking hate the Lego movie. The Lego movie sucks.
Yeah.
So
one of the main criticisms of it online after it came out that you can't really argue with, but yet it doesn't like really diminish it is like, oh, it's just like a corporate cash grab, which like maybe it kind of is just because Lego is on the title and like throughout the whole thing, but it's not a cash grab because it's not easy. Like it's still a good movie. It's like when Toy Story was the first animated computer animated feature film. Like they could have totally phoned that in and just said, we did it first, but they just wanted to make a good movie. And honestly, the parallels between Toy Story and the Lego movie go farther than you would think on first glance. They're literally both toy stories. So one of the things that this movie does super well, and it's kind of like based around this whole thing, but it's like I've been talking about with the tropes and the using different film expectations and stuff like that. This movie is just built around that. I mean, it's got the whole like Westworld thing going on where there are the different areas, which are like the different building packages of the Legos. And so every time you go into one of those, you get like kind of into a different genre. But the overarching story is, first of all, there's tons of Matrix just like injected throughout this whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's the whole Chosen One. There's your Morpheus character. There's he
comes back and he can see the master building, like all this stuff.
Trinity character. He
sacrifices himself.
Cyberpunk-esque things. Even the like, what are they called? Micromanagers kind of have like that noodly, tentacly feel that like a lot of the overworld machines in Matrix have.
Squiddies, that's what they call them. Yeah. But that, I mean, I love the original Matrix movie, and so that is also one of the reasons that this movie is very endeared to me, among all the other things that it has going for it. But it's got like a very almost to the T like hero's journey. You have the Luke Skywalker, Emmett, like, you know, everyman kind of guy who stumbles into this big thing. Turns out he's the one who's going to bring balance to the Force. He has the mentor character. He has the villain that even like in Star Wars, he kind of has to bring back to himself and balance the good and the bad and the
and is kind of his father.
And is literally his father. Yep. Putting all the pieces together.
Putting all the pieces together. Lego jokes.
The puns just build themselves here, don't they?
Building themselves. Master builders.
So you've got like all the basic building blocks of a story going on.
Blocks.
And you've also got just like, again, the zaniest characters. And also now they get to have fun with IP, which we're going to see again in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, I have no idea how they. Well, I guess there's no like super specific references, are there? There's just like really close to references of like Lord of the Rings and other.
No, they say Gandalf and Dumbledore because they get them mixed up.
Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, they do. And that's because they're all Lego characters. And
Batman, Superman,
Lego owns
Green
the
Lantern.
Lego versions of those characters, don't they?
Yeah. There's got to be some like gray area there because the amount of space that's covered in the IP is ridiculous.
There's so much. And it makes sense. I like what you're saying about like this is kind of a preview of their IP fun and Spider-Verse, because in a lot of ways this is just a bunch of different universes smashing together. It's like it's very multiverse-esque in a way.
Being completely separated.
Multi-Lego world-esque.
Oh gosh. And yeah, so it becomes kind of a road movie for a while when we're going through each of the different worlds and we're kind of getting a sense for how the whole thing is structured.
They have to do that. You have to travel a bit. If you're gonna show off all these worlds, you gotta go to them. They do a good job of that in this movie too. If they show something, they deliver on it.
Yeah, that's true. There's so much setup and payoff. They have like even in the first sequence where we're seeing his average ordinary day, and then all those little characters like kind of come back or pop up, or they're all saying what a boring average guy he is. Everything is there like for a reason. And then we meet all the wacky master builders, the robot pirate, and the weird cat thing. I don't even know what the deal with that
Unikitty?
was. That just Unikitty that gets angry at stuff.
Well, she's not angry, Jonathan. She's very happy, very positive.
She's very happy, just bottling it all up. Oh gosh, and then I think that this is something that we got to get into at some point, but the movie is going along so well. The first time you watch it, it's like all the pieces are there, all the story makes sense, all you're getting the references, blah blah blah, especially watching it as an older person. As a kid, I mean, you're getting all of that just at like a more subconscious level. And then the twist. And the twist literally adds a whole other layer to every single part of the film in a way that is not just like gimmicky, but also really sweet and heartfelt.
Yeah, no, it's a really good little character hit there. It actually makes everything, it grounds everything, right? It makes it more than just a wacky, zany adventure. There's real like human stakes at the basis of this. Right, like especially like considering that everything Lord Business does and says isn't just like Will Ferrell, the dad's character, right? Like it's his son's impression of his father. So the evil version we see of Lord Business is like this subconscious expression of the negative side of this kid's dad as this kid sees his dad, which is really deep. But also like kind of really punching in the same way, like it really hits. And it just, I don't know, it makes it really stick with you beyond the theater. I think that's the part that really makes you remember this movie beyond just your hour and 30-minute experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Like everything else is quotable and fun and bright, and you'll sing the song in your head for days. But what makes you remember a movie years down the road is like emotion and connection and stuff like that, and relatability. And they got that here.
And I think the other thing that's genius about the way that it's done is that there's no allusion to it. It comes out of nowhere. You're like, this movie could have. Well, I guess Toy Story is kind of like half in the human world to begin with, but this movie could have lasted completely on its own as just Legos, and they don't bring up any kind of like hint about it until that very end, which has got to be like 20 minutes towards the end of the movie or less.
It's right at the very end. It's so deep in the third act. It's not until Emmett sacrifices himself.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting because Emmett sacrificing himself is the intended end of the story according to the child. And that end changes when Will Ferrell shows up. So in a way, Will Ferrell showing up not only redeems his character of Lord Business, but also ends up saving Emmett and everyone else in Legoland.
Yeah. And it's kind of fun to see Will Ferrell kind of on the other side of that, like especially if you're coming at it from a kid's point of view, who has probably mostly only knows Will Ferrell from Elf, where he's more of the grown-up child kind of character. And then in this one, he's like kind of on the other end of it, shutting all that down. So I kind of want to take a step back and look at this movie in terms of, do you think that this movie would exist without YouTube in a weird way? Because I feel like this movie exists because of stop motion Lego movies that became popular on the internet. Like, that is the only reason that anyone would think to make an entire film that's kind of structured this way. Maybe
it's possible. But I definitely think that you're onto something in the sense that, like, the remix culture of YouTube, where they take popular things and kind of mishmash them together or do Lego renditions of those things, is a really good example of remix culture, is very much part of Lord and Miller's style, right? It's taking all these different parts of the pop culture metaverse and smashing them together into a Lego-verse or a Spider-Verse, if you will. And kind of being part of that. I mean, they are kind of like elder millennial type age-esque. They might be young Gen or maybe young Gen Xers, but they're just on that cusp of like prime remix culture era that loves playing with pop culture and repurposing pop culture to their own ends. And that definitely shows in Lego Movie. Lego Movie is 100% like a remix of a movie. And it is kind of like embracing that kind of YouTube style. Now, I do think that like the stop motion idea is just so natural when it comes to Legos that someone would have hit upon it eventually. But I do think that the fact that it was so popular is part of what made this movie possible.
Yeah. And I just had I had another thought just in terms of the argument that this is like corporate cash grabby, is that there's not really anything in the film that is like merch worthy. Like, it's not like this film was built to sell like Emmett Legos.
The main character is literally like a generic dude.
This is the most boring thing. Like, so there's nothing in there that wasn't already selling well on its own. So it's not like the film was trying to get more sales. Like, maybe Lego in general.
Of, Benny the Space Band really went up.
That's true, for the first time since 1985. Yeah, and oh my gosh, just bringing in some of those nostalgia elements and stuff like that. It's all done in a way that is self-aware, but not like spelling it out for you, except for in like very specific instances, like when Morgan Freeman's character dies, which is just hilarious. I was going to tell you the rest of the prophecy, but I was interrupted because I died. Which is telling you what you already know, but not like in a way that's beating you over the head with it, I feel like.
No. No, he doesn't like repeat it 10 times or anything. It's a good joke. Yeah. But yeah, this one definitely holds up. I think this one, I mean, this one's already kind of a classic, and I think it will be even more of a classic moving forward. It's just is a good movie. It'll always be a good kids movie, and I think for a lot of adults too, it'll continue to be a good favorite, fan favorite. I mean, anyone who's into the kind of creativity or remix pop culture will like this movie. Like it's just hard not to like it on its own. It's so well paced and bright and cheery and goes down so smooth. It's not like there's depth to it, but it's not. It's so easy to digest that like it's just hard to object to it in any way, shape, or form. Unless I guess you hate big Lego.
Right. Even that depth, though, the layers of like you've been talking about, creativity and control and like fear of change or things being different is an evolution in Lord and Miller's process. I feel like even from Clyde with a Chance of Meatballs, which was kind of more of a surface, like just wanting acceptance and relationship with parents who don't understand you and trying to get the girl but being too awkward. Like those are a little more kind of like easy themes. They're universal and they're evergreen, so it makes sense. But I feel like the themes that Lego Movie goes into are kind of on a deeper level, even to the point where I don't think that children can fully understand all the things that Lego Movie is going for in a way that they probably could with Clyde with a Chance of Meatballs. But that makes Lego Movie even more timeless, because the more you grow up, the more you actually understand what the movie's going for.
Yeah, exactly, right? There's something to understand from the kid's point of view and from the adult's point of view. And it only gets deeper as the older you get.
Yeah.
Well, without any further ado, Jonathan, do you want to slide into Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse? Or sorry,
let's swing
into Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse from 2018.
Let's do it. Jason, take it away.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse from 2018. There's only one Spider-Man. That is, until the universe's Spider-Man dies at the hand of Kingpin, and high school student Miles Morales finds himself Spider-Bit and thrust into a role he is in no way prepared for. And he's not alone. Kingpin's experiment gone wrong has brought a whole set of Spider-Men from various dimensions to Miles' world to help him become the hero he needs to be to save the day.
All right, Jonathan. So this one is just a lot of fun. This is a really, really good movie. It is,
even for me, who is completely superheroed out.
Well, it's so much like it's a superhero movie, but it's not like your standard superheroes movie. And in a lot of ways, it builds on it so much and becomes its own thing. Of course, there's a hero's journey packed in there, but like they really play up like the whole world feels confused in the same way that Miles feels confused and disassociated, both within like what he's struggling with before, he sees Spider-Man die and get bit by a spider, and after that as well. So the whole thing just works thematically on so levels. Like the zaniness of the world resonates thematically with the zaniness or the struggles of the character that they're going through, which is a signature Lord and Miller thing, and obviously all of their collaborators as well. And
it's a really good mix of the hero's journey and a Bildungsroman.
Yeah, I mean, this whole movie is basically a mix track, if that makes sense. It feels like a literal like hip hop style remix in a lot of ways. The narrative is that like the way it like samples up from Spider-Man and then different Spider-Mans, and then constantly goes back and builds on its own themes and remixes itself. Like for instance with the all right, let's do this one last time. And they do that for each Spider-Man. And again, at the end, when Miles figures out who he is as a Spider-Man, hits really well. Even down to like the animation style, which is a mix. They use a lot of 3D animation, but there's also a lot of other stuff mixed throughout. A lot of the objects in the world feel like they're animated differently than some of the humans. There's the slight
apparently this film used background. The largest animation crew that Sony Pictures has ever used of 140 animators.
They'd have to. This is a giant movie. They did a lot of stuff by hand. So instead of adding, like most 3D movies, just add a motion blur effect essentially in the program and part of the process of animating within a 3D capture animation type program. But this movie opted out of that and instead used 2D style motion blur effects and I don't really know how this works, but they would 2D animate the motion blur sort of on top of the 3D motion to give it more of the comic booky feel. And there's even lots of parts of the movie where almost all of it except the main character is out of focus or like almost looks like it's double exposed, which is another very comic book signature style, not necessarily intentionally, but a lot of old comic books kind of have that double exposed look to it.
There is a lot of very intentional comic book style applied here, though. So there's, first of all, the most obvious one is that there's a huge mix of animation styles, especially when we start getting the other Spider-Man in from the different universes. So you have the Japanese Spider-Man, and
Looney
she's
Tunes
like
Spider-Man, anime Spider-Man, and noir Spider-Man.
Noir. But the main one that we're using when we're following Miles Morales is it has this like halftone effect in the shadows. So it's like baked into the whole film is this kind of print type of feel to it. Mm-hmm. And then they do something that we talked about back in the Cartoon Saloon episode, which is they use these unconventional framings and split screens and stuff like that, which mimic, directly in many instances the cell patterns of comic books. So they can show multiple things at the same time in the same way that comic books show action by directing your eyes from one cell to another in a way that's much more dynamic than just reading, or in this case, more dynamic than just watching one frame cut or dissolve to the next frame.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole thing is blended so seamlessly. And you kind of get, looking at this movie, why it needed so many producers and directors. Because there's so much here to manage.
It just looks like a logistical nightmare.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. But it comes together nearly flawlessly. Like, the whole thing hits, the whole thing's smooth, much like we were talking about with Lego Movie. The soundtrack of this movie is just incredible. It's just so good. Yeah. Oh yeah, the Sunflower song. Even the fact that Miles is singing it like a dope, which is just one of the most endearing ways I've ever seen a character introduced. Like, how can we get people to like someone immediately? Show them trying to sing a song and flubbing it entirely, but they just love it so much that they keep singing it because it's something everyone does, and it shows.
That's the rap version of Save the Cat.
Perfect, because no one likes a Mary Sue. Which, if you're unfamiliar with that term, it's kind of like, I think most people know what Mary Sue is, right? But it's kind of like a self-insert character, or a character who's too good at, like,
can do everything immediately.
They're just good at everything, and no one likes that character because it's not relatable. It's just annoying.
But it's also very common for superhero characters, which is why it's refreshing in this instance.
It's very common.
Although Spider-Man is always
characters.
kind of a Bildungsroman and kind of a awkward to hero kind of a journey. So it still fits in the Spider-Verse, if you will.
Spider-Man is so awkward and lovable. Just like, Spider-Man might just be the best superhero as a character.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if there's been any other as relatable comic book character as Spider-Man. And I'm not just talking about, like, as me. Like, they're, like, I think to almost anyone, like, the being Spider-Man, and this movie is all about that, is something that is pretty much relatable to nearly everybody. Mm-hmm. Especially in the Spider-Verse world, where Spider-Man, there's a Spider-Man literally for everybody. Like, there are so many Spider-Man.
And that goes, that's a huge part of the film itself. So I love that the film exists in a world where both Spider-Man exists and Spider-Man comics exist. So Miles Morales runs into Spider-Man, and he also runs into comic books that describe Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man and going through the exact same transformation that he's going through.
Oh, that's the exact scene from the first Spider-Man comic too. I'm sure everyone was pretty sure about that when they watched it, but that's exactly like cell for cell what happened. And then they have him go through it, and then he finds it out. What a clever way to reveal that like someone has stumbled into it. Like, I can't be Spider-Man. Looks at the book. Oh, I am Spider-Man. Oh, whoops.
Yeah. And then
the
film ends with the note of, you can put on the mask. Anyone can be Spider-Man. And then obviously I kind of actually laughed when he said, you can put on the mask, because now everyone is wearing masks. But he was like that's the whole point, though, is that anyone can be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man in their own way, which has its limitations in a world where Spider-Man actually has superpowers. But regardless, it's kind of baked into like who Spider-Man as a character is, because he is kind of the rare exception among the more prevalent superhero origin stories, in that average kid stumbles into superhero-ness rather than like Superman, who just always has his powers, or Iron Man, who is rich and he's able to create all of his powers.
I'm sure I just made someone mad, but Superman is a terrible character. I can't.
You know who you just made mad? You made Jerry Seinfeld mad, Alex.
That's fine. I don't care. Like that. His argument about it is just that he is the best superhero because he has all the powers. But that's literally what makes him boring. And like the only good Superman movies have been comedies. Like, I don't. It's so obvious. Like, he is the Mary Sue. He's too good at everything. Like,
yeah, Superman is the definition of a Mary Sue.
Yeah, like it's just not fun. And he's so clearly from that era too, of like the 30s or the 40s, where someone just wanted all the power in a world that felt out of control. So in a way, I get like where he came from.
He's the
but
Ubermensch.
Yeah, he just doesn't. He's just not a good character. He doesn't make for good stories. Batman can make for good stories because he has no powers.
Yeah,
he's just rich, which adds another layer of contradiction. Yep. We could wax poetic about that all day. But I also like that the setup of the concept of the Spider-Verse, which is not original to this movie. It's in the comics. There's been a bajillion different series about it. But it's so fluid in this non-aggravating way that
and it's approachable for people who only know the basics of Spider-Man.
Yeah, and it helps that it's just like, okay, so everyone's Spider-Man, but they're just different Spider-Men. Like, that's not hard to wrap your head around. It's like one character, but 3 million different editions of that character. It's not like the Secret Wars nonsense where it's literally like 3,000 characters and here's 30 different versions of 3,000 characters each. And also everything's operating on a different time frame. And also we're going to undo everything we just did in every single comic. So nothing matters or makes sense anymore. Spider-Man is just like, well, spiders, look at them go. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and you can tell like really good stories in it. I also appreciate that we're just at this point in society, Jonathan, where there is no need for anyone to tell anybody Spider-Man's origin story. No one needs to know it.
Except we get it 5 times in this movie.
We get it in like 2 seconds each time, and we just get the parts that they linger on are just the parts that are different.
And yet there are elements of this story that unfold in a way that are more impactful if you're basically familiar with Spider-Man. So specifically Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, because I think that's kind of the base point that they're assuming for this film, and that's kind of the one that they start with. That's the first the first story that we hear, where he's like, and then I did this, and they do the whole like Spider-Man 3 cringe thing. So that's kind of like where the story starts. But that version of the story, which is the most basic as far as I know,
It's
which
pretty,
involves
it's pretty
his,
dang accurate.
yeah, and it involves his uncle dying. The great power comes great responsibility, and all of that, which makes the whole story of Miles Morales' uncle and father a lot more impactful because it's like a foil to the classic story that we all are familiar with.
Yeah, you have a
in
kid who's running away from
tragic
family.
way. Yeah.
And a kid and an uncle who's not the moral figure or moral signpost that the nephew thought he was.
Yeah. That he should have been.
He's way more complex and kind of anti-villainish in a lot of ways once you get into the depths of Prowler than you would expect.
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole thing is very tragic, but even to the point where if you're looking at it as a parallel, like all he has to offer Miles is keep doing what you're doing. Like he doesn't have any really true words of wisdom because he doesn't know. He's gone the wrong way.
Like all the Spider-Men who are trying to give him advice, they try to give him all this advice, but at the end they're like, well, you just have to keep going. And that's the whole moral of the thing is like, you're going to get hit and you're going to get knocked down. And the trick is to get back up. That's it. And that's honestly really good life advice. One, and two, incredibly relatable, even if you don't have superpowers, which I feel like is just really good. Like both to have a character development and a moral to a superhero story that is actually relatable.
Yeah.
And it doesn't like,
you know who does know what's up in this film is Aunt May.
Aunt May is great in this movie. I love Aunt May. She has some of the best lines.
Yeah.
She's like, I definitely didn't use it to start a dating profile so I could get out of this house once in a while. Like, dang, Aunt May.
But she becomes almost like the mentor. She's like, finally, it took you long enough to figure yourself out and come down here and get your own suit.
Yep. All of the other side Spider-Men, too, are really good, really well-written characters that they seem to have a lot of plans on how to develop further in the future. Even the ones, and they seem to have knowledge. They seem to be very conscious of how much time they have to develop each character. They're like, okay, Spider-Gwen.
There's definitely some diminishing returns.
Spider-Gwen and Spider-Man B, you guys have more time in this film, so you're going to get way more development. And they make those characters complex enough to reach the time they have. And then for folks like Spider-Noir, who is voiced by Nicolas Cage, and I love it. Or Penny Parker or Peter Porker, they give them way less complex stories because they just don't have the time. They're just there for flavor, really. But they're really fun characters.
That's insensitive to Peter Porker.
What's that?
You said they're just there for flavor. I think that's insensitive to Peter Porker.
I mean, Peter Porker's not a pig. He's a spider.
Well, he was bitten by a radioactive pig. That was his story.
This is true. He is now part pig. This is very true. Peter Porker's hilarious. What a good like just cut of random characters. So funny.
Totally random.
I feel like Spider-Noir, who is a real character, I feel like that's like a bit of a jab at like comic book styles like Sin City or like 300.
Oh yeah.
Or Watchmen, where it's like, I'm dark, I'm gritty.
Although I would watch the crap out of a Spider-Noir film that was spun off like the Lego Batman movie.
The Lego Batman movie is way better than it had any right to be. Just like the Lego movie. And it was way better than you have any right to expect something called the Lego movie to be.
Yep, exactly. So my main issue with this film, which is it's not the point, so it's fine, but in terms of the hero's journey, it does a thing that is common, but and it's hard to get around, especially with the limitations of the film format. But the switch flipping from Miles being incompetent to saving the day is so fast. It's like instantaneous. There's not even a training montage. There's a costume montage, and then he's like in there ready to go, which is I understand is kind of the point, like the whole leap of faith thing, but still, like he literally was physically unable to do anything, and then he could save the day. That's so like the main thing that kind of irks me.
Part of it is a constraint for time, right? And another part of it is that they do show him getting experience with all of those moves and everything that happens throughout the movie. The problem isn't that he's physically incapable of doing it. The problem is that he doesn't think he can do it. So he's unknowingly getting all of that experience through failure throughout the entire film. And then he manages just enough, just barely, to pull off just enough things at the end of the movie to save the day. And of course, there's once we're into it, once the music starts playing, the suspension of belief and the credit you've earned over the course of the movie is kicked in, and they just make the fight as cool as possible. So Miles probably comes off a little better than he really is at that point. But a lot of it's for time. I'm sure that in Spider-Man 2 they'll have a lot of that. Actually, so I know you don't play as many video games as I do, Jonathan, but or actually I think any, but
any, yep.
The Spider-Man. So a few years ago, not that long ago, but there was a Spider-Man game that came out on PlayStation 4 that was just amazing. Everyone loved it.
Is that the open world?
Yes.
One. Yeah, really, they had a version for the GameCube, or I think that we played.
They had one way back in the day, my dude. Way back in the day. I know exactly which one you're talking familiar about. With. Yes, yeah. So it's actually very similar to that, but like imagine like a few hundred more people worked on it for a few more years, and they had modern technology.
Nice.
So it basically almost looks like a movie on screen as you play it, but it's really good, and everything is really cool. Spider-Man is really competent because, again, like they have the Spider-Man like in this movie, the one that dies at the beginning, who's basically in his mid-20s, and has been doing this for about 10 years and knows what's up. And can fly really well. Well, they made a version for the new console that came out recently called Spider-Man 5. And one of the really nice bits of storytelling they have in there is that as you're playing as Miles Morales during this game, you do not swing quite as well as you do as Spider-Man. And Miles routinely fumbles and then recovers over the course of the game, and they really work in that little detail of him not being super duper competent at being Spider-Man yet because he's so new. So I'm willing to bet that you'll see something like that in Spider-Man 2.
There's the other thing that I don't know, like all the someone knows all the lore of the Spider-Man world. We'll have Aaron back and he can explain it to us probably. But
oh no, he's DC.
Yeah, that's true. But Miles Morales doesn't have the natural web shooting. So this is
actually something that's different in the Peter Raimi version. Spider-Man doesn't have natural web shooting. He has web shooters.
None of them do?
None of them do. In fact, it was really weird to a lot of people when they put that in the Sam Raimi version.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. I thought that there were some versions in the universe that did have natural web shooting.
And there are now a lot of versions that have natural web shooting, but it is something that was invented by Peter Parker. It's not a natural mutation like you see in the Sam Raimi version, which is, again, a lot of people were really weirded out when they did that. I had no idea when I saw that movie for the first time because I knew nothing about Spider-Man, but it is something that a lot of people saw and was like, that's kind of gross. But also he was also like crawling on walls and stuff. So, and then
Spider-Man 3 emo happened. So
yeah. Also Miles has like his own set of powers, and they did that very intentionally, and they do that with a lot of the spider people to make them feel very different. Like all of them can swing. Obviously, they have their web shooters. All of them have like the spider sense and super strength and reflexes. Almost all of them can climb on walls. But, some of them have different powers. Like Miles's big thing is that, one, he can turn invisible, and two, his hands can be tasers. He can shock people. That's his venom shock, if you hear anyone reference that. Which he does accidentally and then intentionally towards the end of the film. The other thing, too, is that when a lot of what Spider-Man is capable of is just the fact that his superpowers are like hyper intuition and hyper reflexes. So once you're confident with using those, a lot of like you need to aim. Well, you don't really need to aim because you have spider sense. So you can hit the target regardless, or you can dodge out of the way of something because of spider sense. Spider sense covers a lot of bases.
I think there's a wishy-washy like Jedi thing where like Jedis can see like 2 seconds in the future or something. That's
how they can hit all those bullets.
Some book or whatever.
All those light bullets that travel way slower than the speed of light.
Yeah, right. So one thing that I was just thinking about in terms of like there's a lot of parallels in terms of like the hero's journey and also some of the character arc stuff that kind of cross over Spider-Man with the Lego movie and Clyde with the Chance of Meatballs. But I'm almost thinking that Lord and Miller might have created their own trope in the overly affectionate cop father figure between Mr. T and Miles's dad in this movie.
You know, I didn't think about it, but they are two very similar characters, aren't they?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
See my beautiful angel son, Cal. I love him so much.
One exists in a comedy and one exists in a drama. Of course.
Yeah. The dad has like the most dramatic story out of the whole movie.
The dad in Spider-Verse has an amazing story. It's really good. Man, it's incredible. It's a really good story. I really, really, really like the story in Spider-Verse. I really, really like the music. Obviously, they actually had all these tracks and they had some score, and then they had a DJ come in and remix the score to the cut after it was done.
Okay.
Which is actually not as common anymore as it used to be. They used to have, like way back in the day, like 40s, 50s, 60s, they used to cut the movie and then have an orchestra perform to the cut to get the music just right. But nowadays, it's more common to have the song pre-made and then cut to the song, sorta, because the other way is more expensive. So whenever you
that happened kind of American New Wave era, like Easy Rider, when they started using pop music as the soundtracks. A lot of that,
yeah. But they use pop music in this one too, and some of them are 100% written for this movie. But there are also ones that are remixed by, I think, did they get Steve Aoki in to do this? I think they got Steve Aoki in to do this film, who remixed those songs to the track. And whenever a movie really takes the time to do that, especially because since the time of live orchestra performances for scores, movies have like ratcheted up the speed of cuts by like 10 billion%. Whenever someone takes the time to do that, I'm thinking of this movie and Baby Driver, where they literally like had the music on set and were cutting to the music on set and shooting to the music on set. That like it really shows. It really shows, and the smoothness of the movie and the impact of the movie hits so well. I refuse to watch Spider-Verse without like really high quality headphones, basically, just because it's so good. Same with Baby Driver. You have to be hearing that music.
Yeah. And the precision that you can achieve with animation just like makes that all the more impactful.
Oh, of course. Of course. It's incredible. I really like this movie. This movie's really, 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 really good.
Yeah. 3 out of 4 is not bad. So, shall we move on into overall notes?
Oh, you mean, I thought you were rating it like on a star scale. And I was
I'm talking about our movies this week.
I was like, who rates out of 4 stars? And then I realized that you're talking about 21 Jump Street. I'm sure for some people out there that like watched that when they were 16 with their friends, maybe while they were consuming a substance that they weren't supposed to, that movie has a special place in your heart. And good for you.
The drugs in that movie just look like scratch and sniff stickers. Like what even was it?
The drugs in this, it was nothing real. The drugs in this movie in 21 Jump Street were intentionally very stupid. no drug works like that. The stages are just the most absurd thing. Like it's all overblown, immature humor.
I was joking with Taylor when we were watching it because when they show them how the drug works, that like sets up the whole thing. There's some like web video that they're watching like on YouTube of a kid taking it, and we were like, this kid probably just sent in this as an audition tape, and they were like, yeah, we'll use that, and then they just paid him for it, and that was it. Didn't even have to come in.
I mean,
it was all like home video style.
I could 100% see that happening. I'm willing to bet they brought him in, but I could also see the other thing happening.
All right, so what have we learned about Phil Lord and Chris Miller through these 4 pretty different but also pretty similar movies?
Yeah, I mean they like they like comedies that are about extremes, and those extremes elevate both the humor and the inner conflict and drama of the characters in the movie. They like character-driven humor as well. A lot of the situations that get played for humor in these movies are genuinely situations that reflect and are derived from the internal conflict of the character as well. For instance, in Spider-Verse, like the fractured, confusing outer conflict mirrors the internal fractured, confusing conflict of Miles. In Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the frantic, ever-growing outer conflict mirrors the frantic, ever-growing inner conflict of Flint. And in that sense, when comedy derives from the extreme situation, it is therefore deriving from the character itself. So everything feels connected, and the humor never feels forced or out of place in a lot of these movies, which is great. Especially when they're at the helm writing the movies as well. You can see that all connect through. They really like characters that kind of feel like fish out of water, fish out of water.
Fish.
Flint is suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Emmett is suddenly
literally in the town of anchovies fish.
Yeah. Emmett in Lego World is thrust into a world he didn't even know existed outside of Bricktown, where he has to become creative all of a sudden and a unique individual all of a sudden, and he doesn't know how to do that.
Also the human world eventually.
Yeah. Also that. And then finally for 21 Jump Street, kind of not fish out of water, kind of. Well, actually it is, because they're experiencing the other side of the high school experience that they didn't know about. So they are like 2 fish that swapped ponds all of a sudden.
If their emotional maturity didn't match the situation they were in, it would feel more like a fish out of water.
Yeah, it would. It's hard to compare that one because they do a lot of this work in the writing and the animatic iteration, like we talked about, of these movies, and that one is 1, live action, and 2, basically just Jonah Hill's movie. So it feels totally. It's kind of the outlier here, but even Miles, where they kind of just wrote and produced, which feels like a minimization, but I'm sure they had a very large impact on the film. Miles is literally not a Spider-Man, and suddenly a Spider-Man, a Spider-Fish, in a multiverse full of Spider-Fish, and does not know what to do about it. Over the course of the movie, obviously they have the hero's journey that pops up with everything. Everything's very rapid fire. Everything's very quick and slick and smooth. There's not a lot of scenes in these movies, 21 Jump Street again being the exception, that are like difficult or slow to watch. So it's just a good movie watching experience overall, and I'm really looking forward to some of their upcoming projects and hoping that they'll be as fun as their last few projects.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that makes them so much fun to watch, especially for people like us, is that you can just tell how much they love movies. Like we've been talking about, they understand how they work and they incorporate them in. It almost feels like the same kind of way that Tarantino loves movies, and he takes them and just has an insane idea and runs with it, but also incorporates a lot of the history of cinema into whatever that idea is. They do the same kind of thing in generally a more like family friendly kind of a way. And there's a lot to pick up on, and there's a lot more to pick up on the more other films you watch at the same time, because they have a large breadth of cinematic knowledge that they bring into all of their films.
Yeah. I also love that they're just such a strong force in the animation world. And they kind of represent this, like, it seems like they're just like the tip of the iceberg of this community of people who are collaborating and trying to make these really unique, fun projects. Kind of outside of Pixar, but also still in the mainstream, if that makes sense. And that isn't really a shot at Pixar, just the fact that like Disney has forced Pixar dominance upon the industry to the point where, again, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, everything's either Pixar, a Pixar quote clone, even if it's not really trying to be, or it is something that's a total outlier and therefore labeled as indie and not for mainstream consumption. Which is kind of a bummer. Like, it would be nice if like stuff that wasn't Pixar could have a chance at both being considered good and for everyone. And I feel like Spider-Verse is a very good, and Lego Movie as well, are a very good step in that direction. Spider-Verse especially because it's really like you there are definitely people, and I'm sure I know lots of them, who are ready and willing to dismiss Lego Movie as, oh, that's just a kid's movie. There's some good stuff in it for adults, but it's just a kid's movie, and therefore not worth my time. But you can't do that quite as easily with Spider-Verse, and that's promising to me. Like I would like to see some more projects like that can make innovative animation more mainstream. And I think there's a chance now too, because I've noticed with the last few, and this is totally a industry tangent, Jonathan, I apologize, but I've noticed with the past like 2 Pixar movies, at least the Italian one, right, or
Luca?
the one with like the sea monsters, yeah, and the upcoming one as well, the one with like the red panda, or the girl who transforms into the red panda.
Red?
Yep. That their release is kind of limited to people who have Disney Plus. And I know a lot of people have Disney Plus, but I also know a lot of people don't have Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So the market has just gotten way segmented on Disney, and maybe their animation dominance won't be as total, but I can't guarantee it and I can't predict it because we're deep into some untowed waters here, and we'll see how that all shakes out and goes down.
Yeah, and I am interested to see what happens with Lord and Miller going forward, because dare I say, they're probably like in the peak of their career right now. They've got, with the next Spider-Man movie coming out and a couple other things, they have a pandemic movie coming out, which I don't know if that's going to be animated or live action, but kind of, it's called Premonition, a pandemic story. So I'm not sure if that's like documentary about the last year or kind of fictional take. I imagine it's more
Bold
fictional,
choice.
but I don't know if it's comedy, or it almost sounds more horror, honestly.
I don't know. So here's the thing about that, and I'm not sure. I could be very wrong, and maybe in a few years from now, I'll be proven very wrong. But I don't know anyone, and I haven't heard of anyone who's clamoring for pandemic themed content. I don't,
but we all know it's coming. So I think
we
to
all
some
know
people,
coming,
it's
'cause
like
someone's gonna
you
make
got to
it.
be the first one there kind of a thing.
Yeah, but
also,
here's the thing.
We're not like, well, yeah, let's get this ball rolling.
Well, my first on-screen credit for a television show, Jonathan, happened last year with Connecting on ABC, I think it was. That was literally about like friends connecting through Zoom during the pandemic because they couldn't meet in person. And it got pulled partway through the season. And there was other pandemic themed content that was on that did not do great. Things that did like a pandemic episode did okay, but like specifically geared pandemic content so far has not performed super well.
I feel like the only stuff that could pull that off is like a Simpsons or like a, and almost anthological or
maybe, but I just don't think anyone
series
wants
where you just do a one-off.
I don't think anyone wants to hear it. It's like, so and here's the thing that I tend to compare it to in my head is you don't see a lot of movies from the 30s that are specifically about the Great Depression. You see ones that incorporate elements of it, and you see ones that obviously, like, it's a big plot point, like the stock market crash, or the fact that there's a lot of poor people and homeless people and hungry people at that point in time. But you don't see a lot of ones that are like, let's delve into the thematic issues of the Great Depression. You don't see that until like the 60s.
Well, you almost do, but it's not explicitly about the Great Depression. It's just a lot of like class
that's
distinction.
What I'm saying. It's dealing with issues surrounding it.
Yeah.
Like you could talk about like healthcare overall, or like how information is spreading. Like I could see stuff like that doing well now, but I don't see anything that's specifically about the pandemic or even a pandemic faring well right now. I just don't think anyone wants to hear it. And I think much like in the 30s, I think popular consumption is going to veer, and it already has veered, more and more towards escapism and fantasy. And we've already seen like a slight pull away from stuff that's like dark and gritty. Like I don't think anyone really wants to see that right now.
Yeah. The irony is that this is coming at the point where a lot of people are getting superhero fatigue. So it's like, where is that fantasy going to come from if, we're going to get tired of Marvel soon?
There's a lot of TV shows out there that are just about other things, or about like happier versions of real life that are going on right now. I don't know. The whole industry is
like Schmigadoon.
Schmigadoon is 100% escapist fantasy. I have not seen it.
Also very self-aware.
I'm also not going to see it because I've sworn off television. But
and that's Apple TV too. Ugh.
I actually do have Apple TV just because they carry Cartoon Saloon. And I haven't bothered to get rid of it yet. I probably will in the nearest future, actually, because it's just not worth it. But yeah, it's a thing. I don't know. That seems like a risky project to me for these guys. Maybe they're going to have a really interesting take on it. But like, I mean, even other stuff, like there's video games that have been come out that were set to come out that were designed years ago to be called like something, or it was specifically Rainbow Six Quarantine. That was going to be the name of the next Rainbow Six game. And they changed it to Rainbow Six Extraction because nobody wants to play a game about a pandemic right now.
Yeah.
It's harder to tell because The Last of Us was so popular, the first game, that the second game might have taken a slight sales hit from coming out and being about a zombie plague in the middle of an actual plague, and everyone being like, we don't want to play sad stuff right now. And even the fact that you don't see as much apocalyptic fiction popping up anywhere as much as you did during like the teen dystopian apocalyptic fiction era of 2 to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So
but tracing back to the reason I bring this up is that I think it would be interesting to see what they do going forward, because they have kind of a record of having creative differences with the big major Hollywood studios. Like we said, with even their first film, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and also on Solo. And it's hard to tell if that's because their creative vision is so distinct and they're so forceful about it that it doesn't mesh with some of their other collaborators, or if it's just like a personality thing. Like there's a lot of things that go on under the surface there.
Studio, I don't know. A lot of that is stuff that's happened behind closed doors, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
And hard
but it'll
to
be
know.
Interesting to see how that plays out and if that pattern kind of repeats in their stuff in the future, because clearly what they're doing is working. They have so many home runs, like with their animation work and stuff like that. They understand like what people like to watch. But there's also some kind of tension that's kind of hinted at in some of those more tabloidy kind of stories about them. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out with their future projects.
Yeah, it'll be a trip for sure. Especially when we're moving into the streaming era where movies come out online first. I mean, I don't even know if I honestly do not know if Marvel as like a theater franchise is going to survive. I really don't, especially after the kerfuffle with Black Widow. Like, I don't.
Well, it seems like both Marvel and Star Wars are shifting their gears to focus more on their serial
television
content.
shows.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's what it's going to become. I think it's going to become like essentially live action comic book series on air on Disney Plus. And Star Wars was already pulling away because their trilogy they essentially, say what you will about the movies, some of them were better than others, but it's no doubt that the most recent trilogy was just like mismanaged into a nightmare with no proper direction. So they pulled real hard away from doing any more features already. And with the success of Mandalorian, it seems like they're putting all their eggs in that particular TV franchise basket.
Yep. So we'll see. But they have some great stuff that they've already left for us, and I'm excited to see what it is that they come out with in the future. But what is in the future for us, Alex? What are we going to be talking about next month on the podcast here?
Well, next month on the podcast, Jonathan, we're going to be talking about One Spike Jonze, which I just realized is not his actual name. It's his stage name. But we're going to be talking about his big four features, really. Because he's a video guy who got into movie making. And he's got a very unique style that's very different than a lot of the other stuff you see in theaters in the past few decades. So we're going to be talking about Being John Malkovich from 1999, Adaptation, with a period, from 2002, and Where the Wild Things Are from 2009. To be followed up finally with Her from 2013, which feels like it came out sooner than 2013, but I guess it did come out in 2013. So those are the collection of very kind of weird movies, definitely different movies that we're going to be talking about. I've never seen Being John Malkovich. I've always wanted to see it. So this is going to be an interesting set of movies. I have
actually not seen any of these movies, so
You've never
I'm
seen
very
any of
excited.
Oh, yeah.
I missed the boat on Her and also Where the Wild Things Are, and I never got around to making myself watch the first two.
I think you'll like Adaptation. It does star Nick Cage as himself twice.
Nice. I do have a soft spot for the surreal, so I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think you're going to like Adaptation. It's all about like a writer trying to adapt a novel into a screenplay and that going terribly wrong.
Nice.
And it just seems very up your alley. I think you're going to enjoy it.
All right, bring it on.
There's also a potted plant that plays a big role, and I know you like potted plant movies.
I could tell from the cover of that film, which is the only thing I know about it. All right. Well, if you would like to support the show, you can do that by heading over to our Patreon account. Over there, you can join our digital community on Discord and hear us record the podcast live. And even right now, as we record very late where I am, even getting late to where Alex is, which is saying something.
Mm-hmm.
You can also get access to our bonus podcast. So if you would like a little bit extra content where we talk about short films, new releases, and even films that were released 100 years ago, as we will be talking about shortly. The last thing that we talked about on the bonus podcast, though, that you can listen to right now was Inseparable, which is an old as in like 2007 short film starring Benedict Cumberbatch, also starring Benedict Cumberbatch twice. So there you go. If you want to see some Benedict Cumberbatch from before he was super famous and hear us talk about it in a really weird kind of a thing, then go check out the bonus podcast.
Yeah, go check it out, huh? Yeah. Anyway, that's about all the time we have for this episode.
If you have movie suggestions for us or just want to reach out, I can be found on Twitter at JSSatchel.
And I'm at Alex Garinger.
And I'm at the Blue Jay, 1994.
And to find links to things that we talked about today, you can view them on the blog at thefilmlings.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people will know what we're all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Talk to you next time.
All right, see ya.
Elbow pop.
Ow.
No, feels good actually.
Oh, okay.